Welcome everybody. It's our pleasure today to have such an important personality in American University in Kosovo. He's an independent journalist. He's a war reporter who's been in South Africa, in Caucasus, in Asia. He recently came from Syria. He's been there for 6 months. And he's here to inform the AUK students with 100%, let's say, true facts about how these people are suffering, what's going in that country. There are 2 videos that at the beginning he will present to you that shows the state of Syria and the happening, what's going on there. So let's start.
history we go back to see the refugees, people who were incredibly homeless because of the war. We are here to see it.
هل رجعت تاني مرة عشان نشوف الناس شلون عايشين هون وضع إنه بسبب
And photograph to document the way they are living.
بدنا ناخذ شوية صور مشان
And record it.
بدنا نعمل معكم مقابلة.
How we live about some of the stories we have.
حطيت صور للمكان.
Let me try to introduce myself. My name is Vedat. I'm a freelance photojournalist from Kosovo. I've been covering Middle East, South Africa, and the Caucasus since 5 years. Today we're going to talk about the Syrian refugees, as there is an initiative from Vanessa and other friends from the American University of Kosovo to initiate a fundraising campaign for the refugees who are Syrian refugees inside the Syrian territory in dispute. I'm going to try to talk a little bit about, as information I already collected in the information, I'm going to try to share my information about the time being in Syria, as I was a witness of all this situation about 6 months last year. Whereas in Syria and Democratic Republic of Congo pushed the number of people internally displaced by armed conflict, violence and human rights violations to 28.8 million last year. The highest figure recorded by the Internal Displacement Monitoring Center in Geneva. More than 6.5 million people were newly displaced within their own countries in 2012. Almost twice as many as the year before, IDMC said in its annual report. Since these people have not crossed borders, they are not refugees and of course do not benefit from the international protection aid agencies. So that's why there is much more an immediate need to act now and to try to raise some funds and help these people who are living within inside the disputed territories in the conflict. The Syrian Civil War, also commonly known as the Syrian Uprising, is an ongoing armed conflict in Syria between forces loyal to the Syrian Ba'ath Party government and those seeking to oust it. A protest movement began on Tuesday of March 2011 with a small demonstrations in the capital Damascus. This year, March marked the second anniversary of the Syrian uprisings, which turned into an armed conflict. By October 2012, up to 28,000 people had been reported missing, including civilians forcibly abducted by government troops or security forces. According to the UN, about 4.2 million Syrians have been displaced within the country. To escape the violence, as many as over 1 million Syrian refugees have fled already to the neighboring countries. However, human rights groups report that the Syrian government forces have committed the majority of abuses, and UN investigations have already concluded that the government abuses are the greatest in both gravity and scale. So far, I can't really pass over to not mention about the journalist cases. We had 23 journalists already killed in Syria in the 2.5-year ongoing conflict. We have 22 journalists imprisoned and over 6 foreign journalists who are abducted and they are missing still. Nobody knows about their fate. 28 imprisoned network citizen journalists and 58 killed citizen journalists in Syria since the conflict erupted in 2011. The situation in Syria is particularly critical as it is the world's largest, fastest evolving crisis in terms of new displacement. The number of Syrian internally displaced persons is now more than 3 million, as you know, and of which 2.4 million were displaced last year. The Syrian Civil War is the most humanitarian disaster since the end of the Cold War, as we were witnessing, and even more brutal and destructive than the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I believe that until the conflict in Syria resolved, internal displacement will continue to accelerate. This phenomenon has already been seen in other countries with drawn-out conflicts. The crisis is also stretching resources as the United Nations aid agencies and donors are the biggest of which so far is the United States scramble to keep up with the flow of frightened families. Health services, bakeries, school, vital components of normal life are teetering and they are shut down, leaving the population in a total distress. It is also just a decline in livelihoods, a decline in the economic means for families to be able to support themselves. It's a disruption to services, it's kids not being able to go to school, it's water system that have been either cut off or somehow affected, so they don't receive the services. The United States has so far provided some $385 million for humanitarian aid, in which nearly $260 million, according to the United States Agency for International Development, has been already spent on needs inside Syria, but the need is much more. These money are being spent by working through agencies such as the UNHCR and the World Food Programme, but as I mentioned before, the need is much more, and so as much as we can help for displaced, barefoot, hungry, thirsty, and unwashed Syrian refugees within the territory of the Arab Republic of Syria, there are so far living in the school facilities which do not have even living conditions, learning conditions in rebel-controlled Syria in terms of foodstuff, hygiene, medicaments, and clothing for Syrian women, men, and children. I support the idea of Anessa and the other students at the American University of Kosovo to try to make something together, our best, for human reasons and for the human cause. The videos I showed at the beginning were the first videos was about the battleground in Aleppo in the north and west of the city of Syria, and the second was the video that shows my way on the way to school facilities which are situated about 60 kilometers far away in the north, where the Syrian refugees within inside Syrian territory are living. On that day I witnessed it. A woman gave birth to a baby on these conditions, pictures you could see probably the school facilities, and you can imagine what was the situation and what is already, and it is also going up as worse as possible. So any questions I'm able to answer. Thanks for listening.
I hear a lot about atrocities being done by both sides, both the rebels and the government forces. Can you comment on that?
Excuse me?
Can you comment on that?
I cannot hear you.
I hear about atrocities being done by both the rebels as well as the government forces.
Right.
Can you comment on that? What you've seen?
Well, I can't really comment about it. That's the other side of the story on what we're trying to focus on, refugees. But of course, the conflict is a conflict, and we have two pairs involved in the conflict so far. So of course, if you're able, you know, if you stand in front of the enemy, of course he will shoot you, and vice versa. So both sides are committing crimes against humanity, and both sides are killing each other in a way. And of course, that's the title of the World War is Earning the Freedom by the rebel forces, and the government forces is fighting terrorists, as they claim.
So the main goal of the rebels is basically they want freedom?
They want to get rid of the regime.
What do they want to put in place?
Well, that's something which is pretty hard to define so far. There's been several national councils of Syria which were sitting abroad in European offices, and it didn't solve the problem. There were no agreements in between the ground rebel forces in Syria and the opposition political forces outside Syria. No more questions?
Where are you off to next?
I don't know. Maybe going back to Syria.
In refugee camps for Syrian refugees that are outside of Syria, how do they treat them?
Well, I've visited sometimes the Syrian refugees camps in Turkish-Syrian border in Kilis, and to be honest, the treatment could be much more better than it is. but at the end of the day, they do have food to eat and they do have places to sit and sleep there. My main concern is about displacement persons, displacement Syrians within inside the Syrian territory. They're not safe. They don't have food supplies. They don't have medicaments. They're lack of hygienic stuff, and of course, security is the main issue, which at the end of the day they don't worry about, because there's been spread a kind of propaganda or kind of word. That it's a bad sign going to the refugees camps, because there's been reports recently in the Jordanian refugees camps in Jordan. Syrian women has been caught and raped by reportedly Saudis who are visiting time to time the Jordanian refugees camps in Jordan. And Jordanian authority has not been provided with the security measures in the camp. So people are not willing that much to leave the country. Instead of going to the refugees camps and receiving such a treatment, such as in Jordanian border, Jordanian refugees camps, they prefer much more better to sit in Syria, even staying in the school facilities and probably farms sometimes, because the houses are filled over. So we have a number of 4.2 million Syrians displaced within inside the Syrian territory, and we have 1.2 million people leaving the country in the neighboring. So the number of internal displacements is much more bigger than the ones who are outside Syria.
Is it true that some places in Syria they do not receive any aid at all?
Yeah, it's true. I witnessed that.
And
They don't receive any aid at all. What they do, there are men of the houses, of the families. They travel for kilometers and kilometers, and they have to go to the border to buy some food and very, very, very elementary stuff in Turkey. Even though so many of them, they don't have passports, they don't have ID cards, because they have to leave their houses in a very immediate way, because they were flooded from the government forces in the neighborhoods. And of course they do have a problem to cross the border legally to enter Turkey and buy their needs. So most of them choose to go illegally to cross the border, which many times happen to be caught by the Turkish gendarmerie. They get caught, they get arrested for several hours, and then they get a release, but of course they just lose the day and have to come back home without nothing, because they're not allowed to cross the border.
So what's the level of build-up that Turkey has with its military along the border?
I'm sorry, I don't hear that well.
What's the level of military build-up that Turkey has along the border with Syria?
Well, I can't speak that much about it, because I've been illegally through the Turkish border just 2 times. For the first time when I entered Syria, I was caught and then, of course, released after, because they understood that there was no other way of entering Syria. But yeah, there is a big number of gendarmerie, border, military officers guarding around. And of course, if you don't have legal papers crossing, even though you're crossing illegally, you're in trouble.
And what's the reason that they do not receive aid from neighboring countries, for example? I heard that Turkish government is helping a lot of these people. But
yeah, I mentioned earlier before that about nearly $260 million are being given by the United States government through World Food Program and UNHCR. They are trying to supply inside Syria, but of course the need is much more. So the transport of foods and other aid to the people, to displacement people inside Syria, is going mainly through the Syrian civilian activists, and of course some staff members of World Food Program and UNHCR. But of course very few, because the risk is high and nobody seems like not willing that much to risk themselves and go in, because anytime you can be attacked. an aircraft flies all the time, and if you're spotted, then that's it. It's the end of you.
I heard people assuming that some places do not receive aid because of political reasons. Some governments choose the places that they want to help, and
that's true. I can confirm that. There's been villages, and there's been villages where these people who does have also an organized armed group to fight against the regime. If they, there's been the cases that they didn't want to be controlled by any political government outside Syria, such as being used for several other political reasons. They did not agree with these kind of ideas. They asked if you can help us for the human reasons, do that. And in terms of fighting in Syria, it's our business. We want to get the freedom. We don't want to do anything else. So these people, of course, are suffering much more than the others. And of course, some other groups and leaders, of course, have the possibilities, and they know how to make the game happen. So anyway, they receive the aid. And of course, these people who are not really gaining these the aid from the different organizations that comes from different governments, the governments that want to have a group, a fighting group in Syria that preferably would respect the political agenda. They just simply do not agree with them, and that's it. So they send their own people to the border, and they cross the border, try to get some aid, try to get some elementary things for their needs.
What do you think is going to happen?
Well, it's hard to predict. This Middle East, it's the most unpredictable area when it's in the conflict. So far it's a war. There are many fractions within inside the conflict itself. The big problem for me is that then the Syrians are killing each other, and at the top of it, it's the humankind is killing each other. That's my concern. So it's hard to predict.